Welcome back to the Politics Show. My name is Paul Capuzzo, and today with me I have a very special guest, Mr. Craig Uplinger. Craig, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I'm a United States history and We the People teacher at Marlboro High School. We the People, for those who don't know, is a constitutional law course that teaches citizenship in the 21st century as well. I've been teaching there this will be my 30th year coming up. And I've been teaching overall for 31 years, and I'm not tired of it yet. I still love it. I'm a husband and a father and all those good things as well. So.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about specifically your course, We the People. But first, before we do that, I kind of want to go into the topic of education in general. You know, a lot of people are discouraged from going into education for a variety of different reasons, whether it be the workload or the lack of pay. Why did you choose to go into education?
Yeah. Before I get to that answer, I do want to also let the audience know I was your We the People teacher as well.
Yes.
A highlight for me. So why did I go in? Well, I made the final decision to go into education after I dropped out of law school. There was this odd thing that happened in my education. I was doing well in my undergrad, and I was an education major. I kept hearing this odd phrase from people: "You're too smart to be a teacher," which sounded odd, really kind of perverse to me. Don't we want smart teachers? But because I was young, I maybe bought in, and I liked the law. So I made the decision I should go to law school. That's fulfilling my potential. Got to law school, and I did not like it. Not the law itself. I liked the law itself. And the classes I understood well. The surrounding environment of law school was something that didn't sit well with me. So I dropped my first semester because I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I worked as a short order chef, flipping burgers until I had enough money to go back in. I went back into the University of Pittsburgh School of Education, got my degree in secondary ed. And in large part, education has always been something I wanted to pursue, in large part because much of mine let me down. My potential middle school, high school, was really underserved. And I was able to just kind of float through. And people didn't really explore, even seem to take an interest in my potential. And as I grew into a young man, I got a little bit upset by that. And I thought, I want to make sure that at least for the kids I have someday, that doesn't happen. There was one teacher that set a really good example for me. It was a teacher named Mrs. King. She was my English teacher in my senior year. She was fantastic. She showed an interest in me. She showed a love for language, and she taught me that love. And so I referenced her as what a good teacher could be. And the determination to be a good teacher came from all those poor examples I had, not to replicate what they were in my life. And so there was sort of a mission to it. You know, there were a lot of kids that I think needed to be served better than what I was.
Okay, so I'm thankful that you ultimately did go into education because, as you said, you were my teacher and one of the best teachers. But you know, I have to ask more about this class called We the People that you teach. What is it about?
What is it about We the People? Should I talk about how I came about the course first?
Yeah, that would work.
Because that will also introduce what the course is. I had been a coach for a long time at Marlboro, and I'm kind of naturally very competitive. But when I stopped coaching, I thought to myself, you know, in many ways we have probably better students than we have athletes. Not that we don't have good athletes in Marlboro, but we have tremendous students. And but there's not really a competitive outlet for them. So I started searching for courses, and I happened upon this summer workshop at James Madison University about this We the People course. And I went and I loved it. Competitive development was a mock legislative hearing. And but for me to get that course in, a course that creates a team that competes against other schools about the Constitution and law, I had to get it accepted for all the schools in our district, Freehold Regional High School District. And that took me until 2007. And so we launched it in Marlboro and two other schools in 2007. And we've run it ever since. And it's a very unconventional course. It's just as I said, it's a course that divides into 6 units, but those 6 units each create a team, and then the 6 teams together create a competitive simulated legislative hearing team that competes against other schools. And so I had to figure out how to do that. But it renewed my career. It renewed my view of teaching.
So how do you make this team? How do you decide who makes it? And what can you explain what the competition's about? Like, what do you do?
All right, so I'll take those 2 separate ones. I have had trial and error about this. Well, first of all, for a long time, the enrollment in the course was usually well below, like, you don't want more than 6 on a unit team or 36 total kids, because when I tell you about the competition, you see that's just too many. For a long time, I didn't have 36 kids enrolling in this course. It's an elective. And so how to choose them wasn't a problem or a challenge. But in recent years, in the past, I think 4 or 5 years, I've had 45 students or more. So there's had to be a selection process. How do I fairly select kids? My goal is always to take every student I can so they get the experience. But there's necessarily a cut line. So through trial and error, I've come up with this process where the students are basically rated in 5 or 6 areas. So in these areas, I rate them: content, knowledge, their consistency in their efforts and research and assignments and all the rest. But the 2 most important elements are their commitment to collaboration and their commitment to community. We make a big thing of this. No individual alone can create a team. So you have to collaborate with others and work with them. You have to show that willingness consistently. And their commitment to community. You have to be as invested in your neighbors or your teammates or your classmates' success as much as your own. You have to be fully invested in their success as with your own. If you want your goal of competing and doing well in this competition or even making the team, you have to show me you're invested in every other member of your team doing the same. Community and collaboration are the 2 greatest, most valued ingredients that I measure. And I do a number score, and I show the number score, and I explain it to each and every student. And sometimes there's disappointment, but there's never been a student who's ever said to me, "You were wrong." They usually are very transparent about it. They usually say, "I get it. I could have done better here or there. And I'm glad this person or that person's going." So it's a number score based on those, but the 2 highest values are collaboration and community and the consistency with which you show them.
So it seems like competition's almost inherent in this course.
It is.
And, so students, as I said, like, as you said, compete to make this team and then go to the state competition where they'll participate in legislative hearings.
Mhm.
You've been to nationals before.
Yes.
Can you explain what that process is like?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, this was the second year. This year was the second year that we qualified for nationals. We qualified in 2017 as well. First of all, us getting even close to qualifying for nationals happened almost at the same time that I put that scoring mechanism in and emphasized collaboration and community above everything else, even content knowledge. And I found that when that happened, a dynamic happened in my course that just took off, became almost self-creating. And we started to have success, except we were always finishing second to a team named from East Brunswick, who is an exceptional team with an exceptional coach. And they're national level. They've won the national championship 4 times. Well, we started getting close to them, finishing second on a pretty regular basis, occasionally third. And then 2017, we finished first and we qualified for nationals. Well, the first half of the year, you're working up to building the expertise necessary to compete in the state competition. When you find out you're going to nationals, you have to do that whole process again in 2 months' time. for questions that are even more difficult than what you've answered before. So you have to just roll the kids into a new element. In addition, you have to fundraise a tremendous amount of money. The year we went, it was $49,000 for the team to go. This year, it would have been about the same, maybe even a little bit more, because we had 2 more kids on our team. So it would have been over 50,000. That's a lot of work. And so you have this tremendous effort and organization and energy towards fundraising, combined with learning the Constitution, collaborating with your classmates and your teammates, and creating these elaborate answers to elaborate questions and expertise for question answer. It was extraordinarily intense, but extraordinarily rewarding. And anybody from 2017 who's listening to this, you know the rewards and the hard work that was involved. This year, we were well on our way to that process, and we were devastated to hear the news about the cancellation of the national competition.
So when we talk about fundraising for this particular, this is just a quick point I want to hit on.
Yes.
There's certain bills such as Senate Bill 2, which will depreciate funding, particularly to the FRHSD school district.
Yeah.
Can you speak about the adverse effects of, cutting funds from civic education programs?
It's devastating. Every year, up until the last 2 years, we did this, I think, since 2009. Every year we would finish the school year with a field trip to Philadelphia, see National Constitution Center, Independence Hall, and whatever else we could see. And it was just a field trip that was within the school budget. The last 2 years, that's no longer in the school budget. The school does pay for the fee for the competition for states, but is not permitted to contribute anything to the national competition. In addition to that, this cut in funding is just stripping our schools and our students of so many opportunities, so many creative things that we could explore and expose the kids to. And it's devastating. It's taking away quality teachers. It's taking away resources. It's taking away life-changing experiences from students. And we're saying it's necessary. And that to me is the most upsetting thing, because it's not. It's a choice. We in America can choose to invest in anything we wish to invest. How many times I hear, even from our leaders, that we're the richest nation on the face of the earth all time, yet we can't afford to invest in the kids. We don't invest in them in their public education as much as we used to. We don't invest in them nearly as much as we need to for the college education. Let me give you an example. 2009, when there was a market collapse, we had this phrase that came into our lexicon: too big to fail. That company, that corporation, that bank is too big to fail. If they fail, everything else will fail. Well, how about this one? This generation is too many to fail. And when we cut funding from our public schools, there are just too many to fail. And you're failing them, society, America. You're failing them. You're failing them because you choose to invest in other things rather than them. And they know it. And it upsets me, and it upsets them.
So I wanted a little bit change topics about that. I want to talk about the public school system. A lot of people are almost fearful. A lot of people who advocate the sending kids to private schools are almost fearful about some sort of indoctrination among the students from teachers, that they'll sway their politics, they'll sway how they review history, how they sway how they view science. Can you talk a little bit to that?
I never begrudge people their values, and I never begrudge parents on the values they want to impart and pass on to their kids. So I understand the sentiment. My children, if I really felt that they were being indoctrinated, I would say something, certainly. And I'm sure many of these people sincerely feel it. Um, but I kind of want to offer a little twist to this. When you take kids out of public education, are you really eliminating indoctrination, or are you just shifting where it happens? If you, to take your last question, decrease the spending to make public education less effective, or take kids out of public education and put it into private education, why couldn't indoctrination happen there? Or let's say the overall educational system is invested in less and is just not as effective. Are we not just then passing on that education to some other entity in society? When it comes to government and politics, are we being more educated by social media, other outlets that we have, with whether it be news radio or radio news or television news or even podcasts? We're still going to get our education from somewhere. This idea that only public school indoctrinates is it's a fallacy. It's not. Can it happen there? Sure. Should it happen there? Never. But it's happening in society. And I think we have to rise to the challenge of an objective teaching of every science, including political science, in our public schools. Root it out when there's indoctrination, but don't throw it away because there's some.
So I particularly want to hit on the point that you just mentioned, where it's almost necessary to teach political science and politics and civics.
Mm.
There's a lot of advocates for the implementation of compulsory education in schools. Given that you teach a civic education course, should it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here's my argument. It's fairly straightforward. New Jersey is one of 17 states that does not require any civics education. In the other 33 states, if I have my numbers right, civic education is required, but oftentimes put into a part of the history curriculum. So a lot of states are not really teaching civic education the way it needs to be taught. And I think that is directly related to what's happening in our country, with our government, with our politics. Let me explain. In New Jersey, art is a requirement. Every single student must take art. Now, art is to be valued. We need it in our society. It creates beauty and all the rest. But only some kids will become artists, will revolve their life around art. Second requirement, every student is required to take financial literacy. Again, financial literacy is valuable. Some students will make their living in the financial world. Other students will handle their family finances. But we make civics education, which teaches you how to be a citizen, optional. Knowing these words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And here's the key line. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. Citizens need to know that power given to leaders is just only if we give it our consent. That means we're in charge. How is every person in America not taught that lesson? And how can we expect our government, our politics, to work well if the idea of popular sovereignty isn't as known as the times tables? Every single student becomes a citizen, but we make citizen education optional. Art, financial literacy required. Doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how we're going to have a republic that truly works unless we require citizenship education of every citizen.
So I typically subscribe to the thought that the American people are not stupid, they're ignorant. And so would you subscribe to the idea that they're perhaps ignorant because they're not being taught these civic lessons?
Yes. Ignorant is a charged word. But I get what you mean by that. they either ignore facts, or facts have been ignored in their education, which makes them ignorant of what there is. Yeah, I agree. They're not stupid. People are very bright. Young people are very bright. But I lost track of your question there. Your question off of that was?
Do you believe that the people are ignorant because of the lack of civic education?
Yeah. So let me give you another element that every single American should know. The word republic comes from the Latin phrase res publica. Translated, it's the people's thing. Put it around, the thing or property of the people. In other words, the government that we complain about is our property. The leaders we elect, they work for us as if they're caretakers of that property. So either we are absentee owners not paying attention, or we're ignorant of the fact of the relationship. And if we're ignorant of the fact of the relationship, we will not impose our sovereignty upon the leaders we choose. That has to be ingrained in kids if we expect adult citizens to take action. If you ask most people, where do your rights come from? The number one answer I find is the government. Well, that's what we fought a war about. Our war for independence ultimately was England felt because they had given us certain rights, the rights of Englishmen, they could take them back because they could. They were granted by government. Our idea is that they were unalienable, that the rights come from a source above, they are inherent within us, and no government can take them from us without cause. Those rights have to be well known and appreciated with humility but power by people. That can only come through education.
So when we talk about education, as you said, you're a teacher of also history. And often, the We the People course involves itself not just in politics, but in the history of politics. Looking back at Supreme Court cases and the such, looking back at old policies. So I have to ask, America has this history of ignoring its sins. How does your course, or how should a history course, aim to alleviate that problem?
By confronting the sins. To me, that's not complicated. One of the reasons that a lot of times we want to avoid the sin is we want to create this idea of greatness in America. We think that somehow or other by admitting failures or confronting sins will lessen our greatness. I disagree. The only way towards greatness is to admit failure. The only way towards exceptionalism that a lot of people talk about with America is to be stronger than your mistakes. You can only be exceptional if you rise again above your failures. So confront them. Show that 10 lines below in the Constitution, 10 lines below this phrase. I'll shorten it. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, all these promises, and one of them is to secure the blessings of liberty. In the name of the people, framers of the Constitution, we're going to secure the blessings of liberty. 10 lines later, defined a portion of our population, approximately 1/5 of our population, 3/5 a person. You just have to confront that. The perversity of that contradiction in such close proximity within our founding document. If you can't confront that, then what kind of audience can you give to people of color in your class when they find out and they say, hey, that hurts me? You have no audience with them if you ignore it, if you ignore that pain. You have to confront it. Recently just gave a talk about the Trail of Tears at a library. And again, we just have to confront what it was. If we do that, we have a chance to be great. If we don't, we're really threatening more to be ordinary.
And so in my view, I feel a traditional textbook often leaves out those sins of our history. But your class, it has a textbook, but it's not necessarily utilized too often. Instead, it utilizes research elements.
Right.
So I have to ask, is a research element based class similar to We the People, a class that doesn't necessarily give out traditional tests, quizzes? There are essays, but they're done in a different fashion. Is that kind of course the best to teach a civic education course?
Yeah. Yeah. I love this question. Absolutely. First of all, we're two test-based in schools, and the tests are to create data. The data are then ascribed to a student, and then that student has, quote, worth in our system, which is terrible for the psyche of individual students. They look for a number, and that number tells them their worth. That's not what you want. When it comes to citizenship, why not learn in the way a citizen practices citizenship? So I've talked about collaboration and community. Well, part of citizenship is also expression. So rather than have a test where you mark 1 of 5 choices to show a content knowledge, instead you have a broad question which invites the student team to give any expression they want, both as a team in the prepared statement and individually, question answer. In that way, the student is taking in principles, mixing them around with who they are and what they believe, and then expressing it back out in collaboration with others as they develop a community. Isn't that citizenship? It's what Alexis de Tocqueville recognized when he came to America and said was so extraordinary, that we take our liberty and we use it to contribute to a community, enlighten self-interest. So learn that way, collaborate with others, create expression that is both combined and individual in an environment of civil discourse. In so doing, you're not only learning the principles and the Constitution, you're practicing being a citizen right there. So I think it's the most effective way. I won't say the only way, but it's the most effective way to teach the Constitution what it means to be a citizen.
So I have one final question for you. And you alluded to it earlier when you said that originally you were going to make the national competition, but unfortunately, due to this awful, terrible crisis, you were unable to.
Yeah.
Your class is primarily seniors.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to say to the class of 2020?
Number one, I love them. This is a group of kids that we initially didn't get the wild card. Some states get a wild card, and East Brunswick won again. But initially we didn't get the wild card, and then we got a wild card invitation. So we were devastated because we thought we did really well. We did. We were devastated when we didn't get the invitation. Then that school didn't go, so we got the invitation. So now we were elated and over the moon, just so happy. And they dug in so hard, and we started at it. And it created such a synergy and a community in our classroom. And then we got word, and they were devastated again. And then on top of that, they got word that all the elements of their senior year are canceled. The last 2 months, as you know, is an extraordinary experience in We the People, because even if you go to the nationals, you're still doing your 4th marking period assignments, and it's all creative. You did a presidential debate against one of the other students, and we have so much fun, and the kids do such a great job with it. And it's just a great environment, and we have time to really process what it means to be leaving, both as a class and then leaving the school. And this group uniquely didn't get that opportunity. So I love them. I admire the grace with which they've handled it. And they give me a lot of hope for what's to come if more kids carry on this way. So I can't tell you how much respect I have for them. And I want to share one other thing. This year, as much as any year, there's certain kids that aren't on the team. And we roll them over and try to help them, have them help the kids who are. And the manner in which the kids who wanted to be on the competitive team that didn't make the competitive team help those on the competitive team is so inspiring. It is competition combined with commitment to collaboration and community. It's just so inspiring. And if our actual societies and our country were more like that, we would live up to much of what we brag to be. So I can't tell you how much I respect these young people and how they've handled this disappointment. They're an extraordinary group.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to say? Just one last final message.
I wish you well with this. I'm so proud of you for doing this. I've checked in on the early episodes. You're doing a great job, and you actually know how to interview. You do a good job in asking the question and letting the person answer, and you're doing an excellent job all the way around, and I couldn't be prouder of you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Paul. Talk to you soon.